use having hold on, let me hit my okay. Having used this experience, and I think that might be what Jennifer is reflecting on, like what was easy to navigate through the city, what was a little bit of a hiccup that the Pride organizers had to figure out how to navigate, and basically, can we do this so that it's a little easier for the next time? Does that make sense?
Yes, and I also think we should bring our event coordinator to that meeting, because one of the things that I've tried to work on with her is putting together simple guides for people who are using the audio equipment at Stonehorse Green, so that we're not having to reinvent the wheel. And also because that position has already seen turnover, so it's just nice to have that for continuity, to hand off to the next person.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And maybe even we should invite Laura Ports, who handles all the permitting for the city and is kind of the special event coordinator through our tourism department.
So I think though the question before that becomes does the CDA have interest and desire for Pride to be part of our planning for 2025 and be part of our the itinerary of events at Stonehorse Green? So
I think that is a healthy question. I don't know if I'm ready to have that question, just because we have to get through budget first. And there are, things that they're probably looking at from multiple levels. It is something that I truly support. I will tell you that I think it's just one of those things that we might have to also not just talk about the CDA supporting it, but it might be one of those that we need to do one or two more steps if that is the end game and the end goal of this committee is to move it forward to a standard event. Because and Jennifer, I know you know this, but part of it was even just getting the press release, where we thought since the CDA had supported it, then the press release, maybe the city could help us get it out, the word out, but it wasn't automatic. And so having a checklist on what, this is versus this, whether it's a standard city event or it's the group of volunteers who can bring it forward. And I say that because, year one, we learn a lot of lessons on lots of things. In year two, it could be absorbed or it may just need time. And part of that is a budget constraint because we are struggling to get all the things done that we want to do. So if that is an interest of the group, I think we also then need that. I would say that we would have to take that further, of course, to council blessing, and get some discussion at the city staff level for just some things that have come on my horizon about other cities' experiences with certain events. And so as I learn more, we just have to bring all those stakeholders together. So does anybody feel passionate either way?
I think I feel passionate that I'd like it to be a city event.
I can, at least from a sort of process and logistical standpoint, it will be a tremendous challenge for the organizers and future organizers to be able to put it on because of the need for that coverage if it's not a city sponsored event. And it is a really big challenge to get a standalone policy if you're not an incorporated body. And so there's, there is always the potential that that Pride Fest Middleton becomes its own C3, but that is a big lift as well for a group of members, so. As well as like the upfront costs involved in doing so. So it would just be a hurdle to future events.
I would then ask Abby to have that discussion with Bill and the interested parties to go over that key insurance piece, because to me, it sounds like it might be an umbrella coverage since it's, you know, in the city, like at a city location. I might be wrong. If the insurance is the first pain point, let's get through that before we decide, you know, who hosts it. Because if it is covered, just in generality, then our next step would be, you know, what does that cost look like? Can we absorb it? Because right now, we don't sponsor like muster day. It's through the CDA, right? And so like and Abby might have to help me on that piece, but you know, that is a very large festival. And if we're doing it for one, but we're not doing it for others, I think we just need to pause and look at all the things that we do and the things that we let others manage those costs and manage all the logistics. So just a little bit of thoughtfulness before we go forward, but I would start with step one and then report back at the next meeting or two on that insurance coverage, because if it's covered, that might be a different conversation. Abby, does that work for you?
Yes, that works for me.
Okay, thank you. And I am really, really glad that Commissioner Cole is sharing her experience, that we can learn from it. And I'm really glad that Alder Nelson really supports it. These are wonderful. They gave probably hundreds of hours working on this project. And, you know, you get to see the best of people behind the scenes. I get to see the best of people. And, you know, I'm really grateful and glad that you're bringing that experience back to this committee. With that, I'm going to move on to the number 3, the 2025 budget plan.
So sorry, Mayor, may I ask one quick question before we move on?
Yes.
Can I just relay seriously my stupidity about mustard days? I guess I thought that was basically to support a store, like versus a city event, like not it. And yeah, I know it's good for downtown, but it's like on behalf of someone's store, a business, instead of like Pride being just a general. Am I wrong about that?
And maybe that's where we define those events. I mean, that is a good point. I will tell you, I would have assumed that in the past, as I've gotten to learn more about our tourism, because I'd never served on tourism, I am surprised at how much of our outreach to tourists are actually about the Mustard Museum and all the things that they do to draw in people. So, you know, I do understand that differential. However, if that's the case, then we need to be very careful as a city pushing it, you know, so yes and no. And maybe that's something you and I can talk about off.
Sure. Okay. I appreciate that.
Yeah, because I've learned a lot in the last 6 months on how we, and like, for instance, for every speech I give, I am to talk about the Mustard Museum to any conference coming to the city. It's interesting. So, Commissioner Oakes.
Hi, thank you, Mayor. And so to Alder Nelson's point, I mean, my understanding is that it's always the 501c3 that the Mustard Museum has that is, you know, that's the museum is its own entity legally, and that's what we're supporting. And we also support DMBA and downtown, you know, forward events like Sip and Stroll and Stroll and Jazz and all of that, and the Art Walk. But I guess What I was wondering, and maybe Abby would be best equipped to do this, would be, but maybe somebody else, could you talk a little bit about what it means to have an event be city sponsored and what the CDA's role is? Like, are we distinct from the city as a committee? Are we a subunit of the city? How does this work, like from a legal or regulatory perspective for things like insurance and liability?
That's a good question. The CDA is part of the city. I would wanna talk with Bill Burns just to like make sure that he can't think of any reason why something that's CDA sponsored would not be covered. But like I said, the CDA is an entity of the city. The city council approves the CDA's budget each year. And I think the only reason that we came up with the terminology CDA sponsored is because for the Stonehorse Green event ordinance, who is allowed to hold a public event at the Stonehorse Green, the city council delegated that authority to decide to the CDA. So that's when we came up with the terminology of CDA sponsored event. But it's basically the same as city sponsored.
Thank you. And then I just wanted to second Alder Nelson's wholehearted support of the idea of this event and helping to make it happen.
Right, and I would just jump in to say that if the city / CDA were going to take over organization of the event, I think that the primary liaison would be what is currently a part-time position. That's our event coordinator position that we actually have. We don't have a city employee in that role right now. We have a contracted person who's doing that work for us. And that position, whoever's in that position would probably be the primary liaison for helping organize the event, coordinating with volunteers. And it may mean, depending on what else is going on, that there's less time for them to dedicate to some other event that's happening in the city. And we can go over this once we go to the budget. I am recommending that position be brought into a full-time city position with half of the new full-time position, which I'm tentatively calling placemaking planner, because that was the best we could come up with. But it would be half of their time would still be devoted to organizing events at the Stonehorse Green, and the other half would be assisting with other projects that we have going on in my department, like assisting with grant writing and grant administration, assisting our sustainability coordinator with the many projects that she has working on. And then also there is a strong desire from a couple of city committees right now, the Ped Bike Transit Committee and the Public Works Committee. And they've actually referred something to CDA, which I haven't even had time to like put together a memo and get it on an agenda for you all to consider. But they would like us to be doing more public engagement and more tactical urbanism projects. And we've done like 2 tactical urbanism projects, and one of them was we had a temporary roundabout that was installed on Elmwood Avenue, and we had a full-time summer intern who did that project for an entire summer. So we don't have the staff capacity to be going out and doing like those kinds of engagement right now, just with how small we are and the scope of our responsibilities. So I'm kind of going on to a tangent, but what I'm saying is I think that there could be capacity, depending on what happens with that position, if it is a full-time city employee position where we can hopefully get somebody with some more longevity in the role and more understanding of like the different city departments that are involved and like helping to coordinate volunteers. That could potentially be something that they could assist with more than what we have the capacity to do now.
So is there the possibility of subcommittees to take on, right? Like so that you are engaged, like citizens are still engaged and someone.
You mean like with non-CDA members, but like, yeah.
But with like CDA member chairing the subcommittee and yeah.
So if it's an official subcommittee of the city, then you need to have a staff person there and it needs to be a public meeting. There needs to be agendas, there needs to be minutes. If it's a work group where you do not have either a quorum of the CDA or a negative quorum of the CDA made up within the membership of the work group. And if they are not making any decisions that affect budgets or anything, if they're just bringing reports back to the CDA and advising the CDA, but no decisions are being made, then that could be done that way. And so that's kind of how we handle Art Walk,
Yeah.
because nobody wants to sit through like a public meeting where we're talking about like how many trash bags we need and like just like really
Fundraising
logistical.
efforts and yeah.
It's very difficult to like manage a whole event through a
Public
committee
meeting,
process.
yeah.
So you can have smaller work groups, but they don't have decision making.
For that clarification.
Okay, great discussion. Moving on to item number 3, budget plan.
Yes, so I included a budget plan in your packet, and I'm gonna go over the plan that I included here, which was also on your last agenda when we had to cancel the meeting. This is the same one here, but I have 2 changes that I would like to propose that have come up through the course of working with our finance department and city administrator on the budget process so far. There haven't been any public review meetings yet. The Finance and Personnel Committee has not reviewed the budget yet, but we have submitted this now to the Finance Department to start putting everything together for the public review. So the changes that I was proposing, I'm not proposing any changes to downtown snow removal, which is because Public Works is proposing an increase in the operating budget, and that's something that we have really tried to get off the CDA's books, because that really is a general city operating expense to remove snow in front of city buildings. And the TIF district that covers the downtown and that is providing support to the CDA, the end of its expenditure period is in 2025. So after 2025, that is something that the city is going to have to bring back onto the general operating budget. So that's why there's no reason to like increase it at this point. Senior center building maintenance is 0 because we zeroed that out. We haven't had anything budgeted in downtown marketing assistance because that was all moved to when we hired our part-time position, and also keeping the CDA event sponsorship budget at 7,500. Banners and holiday lights, I was not proposing any changes to that. Labor downtown maintenance, this one I was actually proposing a decrease, and the reason for that is the labor that we used to contract out to a local landscaping company, and now we have our park staff doing a lot of the work. So we're seeing quite a bit of savings in that category thanks to our new parks director and her willingness to share her crew with us. The downtown landscape and maintenance item, I'm proposing an increase, and this is a rough estimate, going from 45,000 to 55,000. Earlier this year, the CDA had competitive proposals for our downtown planters and decided to go with C by Designs, Zamira Lumani's company for the planters. And in my opinion, and from feedback that I've heard from the public, it has gone really well this year, and that there's a lot of creativity in the designs that she's brought. Like it's differentiated, and I think she's really done a nice job. One thing that came up, well, actually 2 things. One is we shorted her by 3 planters. So when I put together the proposal, my map was not up to date, and we had 3 more planters than what she submitted a proposal for, which I've told her, like, we will compensate you like based on, you know, the net total cost for 3 additional planters. I think we had like 54 in the proposal, and there ended up being 57. But the second thing is that when the big storms came through early in the season, she lost a lot of her plants on Elmwood east of Parmenter Street, so near like the Valencia apartments, Valencia condos. And then we had like hail and just like really bad rains. And because she's a small business, I think that she did not have any insurance to cover those costs. So she said, I'm eating those costs, that's on me. And she had to like replace all of the plants. And in talking with her, she had some suggestions about that the city may be interested in getting some self-watering planters for the hanging baskets that are on Terrace Avenue. And so I don't have a proposal from Samir yet, and it's up to the CDA to decide if you want to go out and get competitive proposals again. That probably won't happen until early next year, but I just wanted to be sure that with the additional costs that she incurred, if the CDA decided to stick with her, I wanted to make sure that we had a buffer in there so that we could cover any additional costs, or if you decided you wanted to get the self-watering planters.
Do the hanging pots on Terrace, I thought they had a watering system.
They do, but so if my understanding is that if there's not enough rain, then somebody still has to go and water them because the cistern isn't large enough to
Sure.
count on for that. So I definitely saw her out there as I was walking to work many days, pulling her wagon, and it was a lot of work. You know, she has a restaurant on Elmwood, so she's able to like go and refill there, and then she pulls the wagon around, and she kept the plants. I mean, they still look amazing. She kept them like really looking nice, and she's down here every day, so she's able to keep a really close eye on them. I think that she was really thoughtful with everything that she.
Yeah, I've heard good comments.
Good. Miscellaneous expenses, I'm not proposing any changes. We just sort of have an odd number in there. I kept it the same. Part-time employee, this is the current cost. And I had not shown any changes to this in the original submittal because I thought that I had submitted the personnel change request, which is the form that gets submitted when you want to change like a part-time employee to a full-time. And I thought that finance handled that side, but they have since provided the numbers to me for what the change would be for taking that part-time to a full-time. So I'll go over that just here in a second. I'm going to share from this computer. Interest on investments. Bill, our finance director, thought that this was pretty conservative still. He suggested we keep it at 10,000, but he said that it's likely that we would end up seeing a little bit higher dollar amount there. Showing 0 for Edward Jones. The Hubbard Activity Center, I was keeping level, but when I had my meeting with the finance department, I found out that the parks director submitted a change request to reduce that repayment amount. So I'll go over that when I share this change screen. Middleton Station parking lease, we expect that to be the same. The allocation from TIP District 3. This is something that the CDA may want to strongly consider requesting an increase in this because this is the last year that we can get funding from the TIP district. And Bill and I have sort of just kind of casually talked about this for a long time, that we will have up to a 5-year period of time between the end of the expenditure period of TIP District 3, which is 2025, and when we may form a new TIP district that covers the downtown. For the last several decades of the city, we have had a TID that covers the downtown because we want to continually reinvest in our downtown. So it's highly likely that once we are under the state's limit of having 12% of our assessed valuation within a TIP district, that the city, the CDA, the Plan Commission, the City Council, and the city's Joint Review Board will decide to form a new TIP district that also covers the downtown and other areas that we want to focus on. But there's going to be a time period where we will not have the benefit of getting that annual payment from the TIP district. And so if the CDA does not want to spend down its fund balance, which is about 700,000, and that's not a magic number. I mean, there's no reason it needs to remain at that level. But if you want to not do that, then you might want to look at requesting a larger allocation from TIP District 3 because it's the last year that we would be able to get it. It may not need to cover as much from the budget that the city is having the CDA cover now, because costs like snow removal, and let's see, what was the other one? Like the labor for downtown maintenance. So 40, 50, 60. Those items really are more items that really should be covered with the city's general fund. It's just that under the state levy cap, we've been so constrained that it's kind of been pushed to the CDA to cover those. So that's something you might want to think about. And then the miscellaneous revenue is just a payment that would be coming in from the tourism department to cover some of the costs related to the downtown maintenance, because they have a small area that our parks crew maintains, and we buy some of the supplies out of this.
Why was it 9,000 back in 23?
So back in 2023, we were under contract with the Bruce Company, and we got, I think it was 3,000 from tourism and 6,000 from the public library. So they each paid in, and then the CDA paid for the maintenance costs.
I see.
But it's pretty minimal now that the parks crew is taking care of the maintenance, which is also, it's kind of going in the right direction as far as that, trying to get the operating expenses out of the CDA's budget. So now I'm gonna stop share on this screen because I want to share over here. If I can, how do I do that? Okay, good. I'm logged into the Zoom here. Okay, so talked about trying to get that half-time position to a full-time position, and I wrote like a brief job description for a placemaking planner, and sent it over to our human resources director, Brian Walhopter, and he estimated where it would fall within the city's salary schedule. And I had been proposing that it would fall as a grade 9, which is consistent with what our current associate planner level is. But Brian said, no, it's really more like a grade 4, 5, or 6. And so he felt like because of the event responsibilities and the fact that we have the current event coordinator position in a grade 1, that it made sense to kind of split the difference, because we don't necessarily need somebody that has a planning degree. And so we may not end up calling it a planner. Like that's to be determined, and it may be a moot point if it doesn't get funded anyway. But he put it as a grade. I believe he ended up costing this out as a grade 6. And he will now budget new positions 25% into the salary schedule, because he said very few people are starting at 0% of the salary schedule, because most people, when they're coming in, they're negotiating a higher dollar amount. So anyway, he is recommending that we budget for an annual salary of $63,268, and that means obviously retirement, more FICA, and with it being a full-time position, the city would be paying for family health insurance coverage and dental. So the total wages and benefits for a $63,000 position ends up being $94,000. And we're asking for half of that to come from the city's operating budget, and half would come from the CDA. So the yellow here is showing what the difference in the CDA's budget impact would be. So there would be an extra $21,160 from the CDA if this position were funded in this way. So now I'm going to stop share that and I'm going to show you what that means with the changes. To the budget plan. So the red lines are the areas where we would be changing it. Can you all see that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So the part-time employee costs would increase to 44,000. The FICA cost would increase to 2,400. And then I also mentioned that our Parks Director is proposing a decrease in the funding for renting the Hubbard Activity Center space. And I think that that's just due to constraints of the space, how small it is and how many registrations they're able to get for programming within that space. And so she's recommending 2,300 rather than 55. So that would mean that we would have a deficit of 43,760 unless we were able to get an increase in the allocation from the TIP district.
What's a reasonable number to ask? Sorry, Quinn.
Well, let's see. So there's a $43,760 deficit in 2025. And then we potentially have, that's a year, but we're doing 2026, 2027, 2028, and 2029, possibly 2030, that we wouldn't have a TIP district. And I mentioned that we've been getting 140,000, but that around 60,000 of those costs, I think, will end up needing to be covered by the general fund. So if you took the 140,000 minus the 60,000 that would be covered by the general fund, then you're at 80. But remember, we're also operating at a deficit this year. So if you went 120,000, you would need, let's see, 140 minus the 60, you're at 80 plus the 40. So you may want to ask for, and this might be too much, the council might say, thanks, but no thanks.
Gotta aim high.
Yeah.
Oops, 5, yeah.
Be 643,760.
Was that number over 5 years, or was that, I'm just clarifying.
No, we'd have to ask for it.
We would have to ask for it now because the TID will be closing in 2025. Now, there's also, if you want more time to think about this, because I realize this is a big dollar amount and you may not be prepared to make a decision on it, you can request that from the TID anytime before the TID closes in September. It just might be a budget amendment. It might be a resolution to amend the budget.
It's even more dangerous.
That's like the
Sticking
last
our head out.
resort.
I think one piece of information we would need is how much is in that PID district. Because if, say, there's $1 million and we're asking for almost 700, that would make a different answer than if there's $40 million. And then the next piece of information I would want to know, I guess this information would be from the group as a secondary, once we learn that first fact. The second piece would be, are you willing to spend down some of our $700,000 and not in lieu of the ask, but maybe it's a 50-50 split, or it's a 60-40 split, like we ask for 60%, but we're willing to put in 40 from that base. And I understand that I've not been on this committee, over 2 years. There might be some historical information that I'm missing on that piece. But what I'm trying to say is that if we go to the city and say, we want to spend $700,000 over the next 5 years, which I get is that budget line, but we're not willing to spend any of our money, it may not be well received. Where if we say we're willing to spend, can we have 70-30, 60-40, 50-50, whatever is reasonable to this group, I'd be willing to support that if we're willing to give some to then make that ask. That I understand I shouldn't be talking so much. However, my budget nerd came out, so my apologies. I know that Commissioner, is it Wakely? And Commissioner Oaks have their hands up. You guys might know which order you are. If not, please go ahead, both of you. Take your turns.
Quint first, I think.
Yeah, so Mayor Kuhn asked, one of the questions I was going to ask is just how much money are we looking at in the TID? And also another question I had is just, who else has their hands in that pot? Who are we kind of competing against in terms of, or not necessarily competing, but, what are the priorities there in terms of who needs money? And my other question was also, we have the $700,000 reserves, what is kind of the functional purpose of that money? I know we get interest on it. That's part of our budget, but, is it not for a situation like this? That would be, I like what Mayor Kuhn was suggesting around, approaching with, we have some money we'll put forward too, but we need a little more in order to cover this, structural deficit, if you will, moving forward. Those were my questions.
Let me just try to answer one of them. I wish Bill Burns was here to go over this, but so TIF District 3 that covers our downtown benefited from a 10-year legislative extension during the Great Recession. We had some projects we still wanted to do, and so it has had a very long life. It was opened in 1993, and it also contained like basically all the property west of the Beltline, which was undeveloped at that time. It started with like the improvements to the confluence pond, and it created a lot of it involved creation of a lot of increment because it was mostly greenfield. So there was very little base value. It is currently the largest TIF district in the state in terms of the valuation. So I just pulled up the TID annual report from 2023 that our finance director submits annually to the Department of Revenue, and we have our TID joint review board. That's the city and the other 3 taxing jurisdictions, as well as our citizen member. They meet annually to review these reports. And this meeting is actually taking place next week. So this is up-to-date information. And it looks like at the beginning of 2023, there was 28 million in fund balance available. So that obviously is going to change over time. We are doing a large capital project right now with the Pleasant View Road that was completed in 2020, actually 2024, recently completed. We expect that we are still going to have a very healthy fund balance at the end of this. The city council is anticipating that we would be taking advantage of something that's offered by state law now, which is a 1-year extension of a TIF district to support affordable housing. And you can take 1 full year of tax increment. You can see in 2023, a year of tax increment is just under $10 million. And you can use that to support affordable housing anywhere in the community. You're not just constrained to the TIF district. And I also mentioned that because I think we talked about this a little bit previously, that the CDA's role, it contains workforce housing purposes. I actually came straight from a tour of the city of Madison's Triangle site redevelopment, and that whole project is being done by their CDA. So with that legislative extension that the city is likely going to be taking, there may be more housing roles for the CDA as that shapes up. But what was I getting at? What was my tangent for? So I'm just showing you like what a year of tax increment looks like, and letting you know that we have a very healthy TIF district and a healthy fund balance, I guess.
Would this be a good time for me to ask my questions? Yep. Okay, so I guess the first one is just really practical. Can we invest and collect interest on any transfers from TID 1 to us?
Yes, and they are invested, yes.
And so at even a very conservative 4%, that gives us almost $27,000 in income per year, assuming we didn't touch the fund balance. So that goes, you know, partway toward making up that deficit. And then I guess my other question is, what are the, again, like, what are the statutory uses of this money, and does it fall within, would our request be like comport with the intent of where this money is supposed to go?
Well, I think that it would more be whether or not it's within the statutory purview of the CDA, because the CDA's downtown area that you have focused on is covered by the district, and you're receiving essentially a grant of funds from the TIF district. So I think that if you were, as long as you were spending the funding within the area that was covered by the TID, I think it would.
Okay, thank you.
I was gonna try to pull up. Kari, remind me again what your first question was, because I thought I had something I could pull
Oh,
up.
just interest. That's all.
Oh yeah, interest income. Thank you. So I can show you.
Abby, I have to step off the call. My
Okay.
apologies. Do we still have quorum or no?
Yes, we need 5 for quorum. So it's 6:23 p.m. and as long as Katie can take over chairing, we should be good.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate your insights.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Just gonna pull up and let you know like our actual interest income for the first half of 2024, because I got that from her. Oh, actually, I apologize. I don't have, they make that transfer like at the end of the year into our account, but I think I can show you. So here's, you can see on this spreadsheet. So in 2023, our actual interest income was 27,000. And we've just conservatively, without knowing where interest rates are going to go, we've conservatively been projecting 10,000. Actually, there is a year to date on this. It looks like it's as of June 30th of 2024, it was just under 5,500. So.
You guys mind if I ask a question? The $700,000 that we have in unrestricted cash, is that something we would be using for a workforce housing program to help with down payments, etc., or is it something, or would it come from someplace else? It feels like it would behoove us to ask for at least something to cover us not having TIF payments for 5 years.
Yeah, you could use that for a down payment assistance program. The 700,000, that would be ineligible. use of funding for that. Or you could use the 1 year. I think that that is something that the Workforce Housing Committee is trying to put together a plan for like where they think the funding should go with the closure, the TID closure. And I know that they've talked about down payment assistance. That's also a goal in our comprehensive plan to reinstate that.
Right. But it wouldn't all be on us.
I mean, it probably would be a program that this entity would oversee. That was how we did it last time. I would hope that if we were gonna go back into the down payment assistance loan program, that we would really make sure that we have a really strong partner that can help with underwriting and all of, looking at income qualifications, and that wouldn't happen within the city staff because we don't have that expertise, and also we don't like those documents to become public documents. But I think that the CDA would probably oversee a program like that, but the funding wouldn't necessarily have to come out of the 700. It could come from the 10 million or however much the amount is, because we don't want to put any exact amount on that yet, because we don't know, but 10 million or however much the amount from the TID closure ends up being for the 1 year affordable housing extension.
Are you asking us for an action tonight on this?
I mean, if you want it to be part of the city's budget process this year, we're starting the meetings, like, as you know, very soon. So if you want an increase in that TIF allocation and you want it to happen as part of the 2025 budget process and not later as a budget amendment, then I think you would probably need to do that now.
Can I ask a question? Is there a downside to requesting what we think we need? I mean, it's like, you can just say, no, you get nothing. I mean, like, I think that's like, I feel like aim for what we think we need to cover it. I mean, knowing that we have the reserves is good, that we could use some of that, but if we could get, I don't know if there's a downside to requesting what we need
That's a
there.
great question.
Because what happens after 5 years?
Then there's the new.
Then hopefully we would have a new TID that also covers the downtown.
And if we don't have something coming in to replace that over those 5 years, we then have effectively spent down reserves, in
Right.
which case we've got nothing for new initiatives.
Sounds like there's a rationale to
Yeah.
request that.
So that maintains for the 5 years, yeah.
Thoughts from Quinn and Kari on that?
I think I would just echo my question from earlier about, who else is reaching into this pot of money. It's a very large pot, as we saw from the number. Because I would also echo everybody else's thoughts of we should be asking for more of the money from the TIF to cover, our structural deficit, essentially. Yeah, those are my thoughts.
Right, thanks.
Yeah, I would echo that. We're talking about less than 10% of 1 year's worth of revenue from this is what we're talking about. And, we kind of are the downtown, and that's the area that this covered. And especially as we're talking about maybe wanting to have some working capital as a group to dig into some really, really important city issues like affordable housing, I think we could potentially, I think we could do a lot of things with a little more working capital that are more creative and substantive, maybe.
What do you think? I think we request what we.
You wanna move? You wanna make a motion?
Is that the number? I make a motion to request the 643,760, if that we think that's.
I mean, I just calculated this.
Yeah, no, we kinda
roughly,
put
so
it
I'm
in
wondering if we
quickly.
should round it out so that they don't think we've like.
650.
And I think
650.
we would also want to adjust, right? Because if that's to tide over for 5 years, knowing that costs will increase over those 5 years. So what would the incremental adjustment, inflation,
Yeah.
general adjustment look like? So I think then,
3% per year-ish.
yeah.
Quinn, go ahead.
I would echo all of that and say that shooting for a larger number would probably be better.
What's
and
your number?
I would say somewhere between 700 and 750,000, just because there might be some variance in building on, year over year inflation is going to raise that number. We don't know what's going to be happening over all of these years. We're basing it off of our budget kind of loosely. Maybe we could get some better math, but
We're also making some assumptions, if I understand right, Abby, about some of our recurring expenditures being moved over to the general fund, and we can't necessarily count on that.
Right,
Yeah.
Point.
that's true.
Good point.
Good point.
And I'm also wondering because, so right, the 120 aligns with budget year 23, but 24 was 140. We're proposing another 140 from those revenues. So,
Right, this would just be the additional amount that you're asking for.
right, but 120 per year rather than 140 per year.
Oh, okay, so the 120 is the 140 minus the 60,000 that I thought would come off, but then plus around 40,000. I mean, it's a very rough calculation. So
Yeah.
please feel free to change it in any
I
way.
think it would be contingent upon getting snow removal off of our budget.
Do we want to amend the motion?
Oh, yeah.
Say.
don't
I'm
have
trying
a
to put
second
the
yet,
numbers
right?
here.
did we make a motion or did we just kind of
No, we
start
didn't.
talking
We
about
put,
it?
I put the original number out there, but we had
Yeah, we
discussions
do
on
have
the
a motion
number.
on the table of the six
Oh,
forty-three,
okay.
760.
But no one has seconded, so it could fail based on the second.
Oh,
We could make a friendly amendment
if
before
we-
seconding.
Amend it.
If
Quinn
it
wants to
fails
amend.
getting a second, then we can just kill
Quinn
it.
can amend if you'd like
So
to.
what would an amortized 3% look like on that? Sorry.
All right,
Can't do
so
that math in my
I'm
head.
gonna say, is there a second
For what's the amount we're talking about
for the
here?
original amount?
Oh, I see. I'll
Six
second.
43, 76, what?
I understand. I'll second.
Well, we can
Okay.
amend the
Does
number.
anyone want to do the math
But
really quick for me?
We can vote it down or we can amend it, because we want a higher number.
Yeah. So if somebody can do some math and I can start working on
Okay,
that.
so we can vote it down if you want.
Or we could
'cause
just do a
have
friendly
to Vote
amendment.
right now.
No, I
Discussion.
I move to amend.
Thank you.
Yep. So then we're not voting down any
Are you doing
figure.
a substitute motion
Substitute motion with the number that Abby's,
about to get?
yeah.
Thank you.
Are we ruling out tapping our reserves?
This would allow us to do other things with those if we decide to move.
If we
could
got
spend
the
more,
amount,
right.
we probably wouldn't have to tap into those.
And can do other
And
things
then we
with
can
those.
do other things
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah.
And it gives us some runway to see what the next TIF district might look like and have those projections too.
Fine. It's nothing like doing math
sitting
under
here.
pressure.
I know, I'm sitting here with my arms folded because math is not my thing.
Oh, I was just gonna say, it's not my thing.
My 8-year-old were here to
I'm a
help.
word per, I like words.
Okay.
Numbers, no.
just, I ask simply to not have an arbitrary number.
Hmm. So we have an argument for why we chose the number.
Yep.
If I pull this down and if it actually works here.
Okay.
Abby, can you share your spreadsheet again?
Yeah, but hold on, I'm doing my calculations.
Oh, yeah,
and then
yeah,
I've
yeah.
got-
Okay.
Okay, let me just. I did that right.
Oh,
Oh, okay. I hadn't counted in the original 45,000 or whatever. Okay.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so this was the. Yeah, I guess you're right. I shouldn't have inflated the 2025 because that's an actual.
Well, it's just a couple thousand.
Yeah, this should actually just be this. Now let's see if it.
oh,
So I make a motion or substitute amendment to $700,000. Give it a nice run.
Do I have a second on the substitute motion of $700,000?
I'd second that.
Quinn seconds. Any other discussion?
I would just observe that that is kind of right on the money and gives us some room to have some income from investments while still providing a cushion because of some projections of budget decreases that may or may not come to pass. So I think it's reasonable.
and I was gonna say, I really like the addition of a full-time planner.
Yes.
Including that in the budget, because I think it would be a really big benefit for the city and just keeping those events at Stonehorse Green too. And with the salary projection, I work at an association management company. We hire people like this. I think that's a competitive like salary for like getting somebody in an event planning role. I think it would be competitive to get somebody with some experience in there. So
Great, it's great to know that. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the substitute motion for $700,000 ask of the TIF district, signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Did you get the motions and all that stuff?
Yes.
Got it.
I got you. That was.
Does that cover our agenda?
What are the steps that we need to do for the rest of the budget plan?
Nothing at the moment. We just needed the submittal approved to go to finance. And then I'll keep you posted through the finance committee discussions and let you know about any changes that they make or suggestions or anything like.
Awesome. Great, if there's nothing else, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Thanks for letting me step in and share. at
Thank
the
you.
end. Appreciate it. Thanks for
Have a
coming.
good one.